Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we are going to go through the last part of Mike Tendy's unofficial look at update 179, and that is the future stuff that'll come in the future. Now some of it has already come to the game, other stuff is worth discussing, but I wanted to push across a changelog which happened yesterday. And this changelog was pretty big, and when we look at the changes, it didn't really make a lot of sense how big it was. Now we know now that the Soviet ships have been released. So those ships I'll have a look at for you. I'll also have a look at the premium. There'll probably be 2 videos today looking at those. But today we're just going to focus on right now we're going to focus on the future stuff and also this update. So the update yesterday fixed fences. A lot of people had this issue. I personally also had this issue where you were cantering along in any tank and then a small obstacle would stop you stationary for about a second, and then you would kind of rubber band to about half the speed, and it was annoying as hell, to be honest. It meant that machine gunning fences was something you had to do, and to be honest, this happened also before update 1.79. It just it was a little bit worse after update 1.79 released, but it seems like now it's been fixed. We'll have to see. I think the issues I personally have are more ping related when it comes to stuff like this, but hopefully for the majority of players it is fixed. There was also a bug where an AB ground forces drop bombs were not visible has been fixed. That can be annoying as hell because obviously you want to know when you're about to die. And rare lagging after activating the to battle button in aircraft battles has also been fixed. So, 3 bug fixes. A lot of people talk about how Gadget never do bug fixes, so there you go. There's some bug fixes. Something on that point, actually. I've heard a lot of people recently talk about how why don't they just do a patch with only bug fixes? And when you actually look at each of the major patches that Gaijin do, the majority of the patches are literally bug fixes or changes to existing vehicles or existing maps. Like, all you have to do is have a look at the updates. Changing it so it's just all bug fixes would not really matter, because that's the point of these little changelogs, and that's the point of the, little additions to the game between updates. So yeah, it just seems a bit odd when people talk about that point, because they do, bug fix a lot. So, let's talk about future stuff. Now, he's labeled it 1.81 doc. The issue with this is because we don't know exactly if it's going to come out in 1.81. It's just kind of, thought to be. Now, obviously, we have the IS-7 in-game right now, if you've seen any videos over the last week or so. Operation Summer, the main prize of it, after finishing stage 1 and 2, is the IS-7. So, I'm not really going to talk about that, there's not really much point. We're going to focus on all the rest. So, radar and infrared. These are 2 ideas that have been bounded around in aircraft and ground forces for a while. We've seen a few Q&A questions on it from the developers, and the main thrust of it from the developer's point of view is the fact that it's too tasking on certain lower tier systems. So stuff like laptops from a few years ago, or, computers which are quite old. One of the things that Gaijin has always been on the forefront of is trying to create mechanics or create engines which are designed for a variety of machines. And if you look at War Thunder and compare it to the majority of games out there, it is very forgiving to people who have older machines. And all I can say is, thank you for that. It basically meant I was able to get into the game, because my laptop at the time was an awful machine, and still is, because it has so much broken on it. I was even able to record on it, for God's sake. But nowadays, with the computer that I have, it's nice that I can enjoy the great graphics, but I can also be happy that people at the lower end can still play the game instead of, people being stuck in an area where they can't really do a lot and they have to play something else. So, yeah. But anyway, with this radar and infrared was definitely mentioned in a Q&A where they said, we're thinking about implementing it, we're just struggling with performance. And and also on lower-end machines. So when they say something like that, it means that once they fix the performance, then it's definitely going to come into the game in some way. And they were mainly talking about top-tier ground forces here when they were talking about infrared in their optics. So there was new data which was added for engine infrared brightness from different directions from the engine. So this to me seems like they're trying to work out how to obviously see stuff through infrared scopes, and from different angles will produce different shots. So it seems like it's getting there, or maybe they're testing some stuff. There was also a radar cross-section, which was based on angle. So we're getting what seems to be quite a complicated set of things going on here. The issue with infrared, I'm not sure how much of an issue this may be, but it may be an issue, is the fact that, first of all, you have different levels of infrared, and also, when you introduce a mechanic like infrared, I've never seen it not be abused in a massive way when one side has it and one side does not. Infrared, especially in a game like War Thunder, will be an incredible improvement in working out where enemies are on the battlefield, and will definitely be used by the majority of vehicles that could use it. The issue with it is, though, just like the scouting mechanic or any other mechanic which is limited to specific vehicles because of, historical reasons, you get to a point where you have one side of the battlefield that'll have it, and another side which doesn't, meaning that one side has the advantage over the other. The way to see it in scouting is at 6.7. America has 3 scouts, at least 3 scouts. You have the M56, the T-92, and the Ontos. So all of those around that rank 4, 6, 7 bracket. Now, if you look at Germany, they have 1 premium scout, and that's it. You have a look at Britain, they have nothing. You have a look at Japan, I suppose they have the Bulldog, but that's a bit lower BR. And then you have a look at Russia, and I believe Russia have the 7.3 BMP. So you can see that it's not exactly equal across the board when it comes to that mechanic. Oh, you also have the Type 62, I believe it is, the light Chinese tank, but that's obviously a gift vehicle. But yeah, you can see it's not equal across the board. So that is nice that some nations are able to get a mechanic over others so they can have a different playstyle, but it does put another side at an inherent disadvantage, and with infrared, that definitely would happen. Because it's not like scouting where there is a bit of skill base to it. It is pretty much, let's turn it on and have a look at the enemies. Horsepower and thrust ratios to infrared brightness ratios, so basically I'm guessing in the options you'll be able to change on a slider, kind of like how you can for everything else. And then some parts are in a section called FM constants. So if you think about the word constant, that obviously means something that doesn't change. So with FM, or flight model, then we have a section of things that don't change. Now, whether that's referring to infrared or radar, or whether it's just talking about stuff in, War Thunder in general when it comes to flight models, then we're probably going to see something which resembles air radar from very early on. You've got to remember that radar was used on the ground in World War II, but it was also used in the air. The classic examples are stuff like the DO-217s. I suppose you could throw in some of the British night fighters, which also had it, which are probably the ones which more people know about. And then you also have weapon lock controls found in files. Now, when we look at these two last points, the way I described it before and the way I hope it comes into the game is there are certain aircraft out there which are definitely worse than their counterparts. Most of them are twin-engine fighters. We look at the Beaufighter, the P-61, the Japanese twin-engine fighters, where only the no, it's not the Ki-84. It's the Ki-48. Basically, the co-version of the twin-engine Japanese fighters. That is one of the only ones which is useful compared to its compatriots in the tech tree. Now, these two systems, when we look at radar and when we look at weapon locks would help something like a P-61, so you'd be able to shoot more straight. It would also mean that something like not a Whitley. Oh my god, I can't remember his name. Anyway, we'll move on. So stuff like the P-61 will actually be useful. When it comes to radar will also give people a little bit of a boost. I need to find this airplane, otherwise it's going to kill me. Right, so what I was talking about was the Bolton Pole Defiance. For some reason, I always forget its name. But basically, it's something which a lot of people liken to a Hurricane, but it's not a Hurricane. And it was used as a fighter. It was used at quite large success, actually, because the Germans thought it was just a normal fighter. And then what happened is they would sit behind it, and then the 477s would open up and kill them. It was one of the most successful fighters when it was actually used. Now, when the Germans figured it out, it got absolutely annihilated. So what happened was it was changed from its duty of trying to hunt bombers, even though it was too slow, to trying to night fight with its turrets. The idea would be you'd get in front of the bomber formation, you'd sit below it, you'd angle the gun up, fire the gun up, and that's how it would work. It had limited success in this role, but its main success was against stuff like Bf 109s, who didn't realize what it was, which is hilarious. Sorry about that. So basically, you could fix these 77s going forward, meaning that you were able to... Oh, hello. You were able to shoot forward instead of just backwards. So something like this plane in the game, a lot of people have said would be useless. I'm one of those people, because it would be a completely defensive plane, and also in realistic battles and arcade battles, you don't have the luxury of people not knowing what you are. It's very obvious what you are because you have a name tag on your head. So people wouldn't believe you're something that you weren't unless, you know, we had some kind of weird system where you could actually put yourself off as like a Hurricane or something. But yeah, the only way this would be viable in game is if you could fix it forward, or as some weird and wonderful gift plane, which I wish it would be. But something like this weapon lock idea would benefit something like a Defiant and also the P-61. They have talked about in the past that the P-61 will get its weapon lock on its 50 cals, but it's been a long time, and we haven't seen it. So hopefully in the future we see it. Now, new maps. So, 3 ship maps. We get Calais Port, Mediterranean Port, and the Far East ships map. Obviously with ships, one of the interesting things is once you get to the larger ships, a lot of the time, these ships would fight with open sea, I suppose would be, or small islands. And it's nice to see that the small islands part is represented in the game. I still think map design won't ever help ships. You could make a map like the only one that would work if we actually want to balance smaller ships and larger ships is there is an arcade map, and I can't remember what it's called, but you basically have mountains, and then you have rivers running through the mountains, but the mountains overhead are closed. So basically you have a huge section of caves going through everything. And it's a really cool map for Air Arcade, one of my favorites. And you have transport boats or PT boats going along in the water. And that would mean that small boats would be able to fight each other instead of any destroyers or anything like that coming in. Now, you still have the issue of the LCS and the SF-40 annihilating everything, and they still would on maps like that, but at least they'd probably get hit by torpedoes a few more times. The biggest problem with ships right now is from playing the Germans, playing the Americans, and now I'm going to play the Soviets, now that they've increased RP by double, so it may be worth playing it for some people now, is the fact that it's whoever has the bigger guns wins. You can find this with the SF-40, you can find this with the LCS, you can find this with the destroyers and their light cruiser. It's very hard to win if you don't have the bigger guns. And sometimes, yes, you'll get a torpedo hit, and you'll be able to sink one after he's killed 4 or 5 of your guys. And it's a sad state of affairs, but it was obvious this was going to happen, and it basically means that you have to put barriers between matchmaking, and if you do that, then you're going to have levels which nobody plays. But anyway, the maps themselves, Calais Port, so northern France. It's a lovely area. I hope it's not actually a port, because otherwise you would have one side crammed into a port and the other side just annihilating them. Mediterranean ports, so around, south, I suppose you'd say southeast of Italy and Sicily, places like that, near Africa. That's a nice area. Hopefully we have some lovely colours. We already have a few maps which represent these areas. And then the Far East. The Far East, obviously desert land and stuff like that. So overall you have 3 ideas of maps. One of the lovely things I liked about the ground forces and air forces maps, you could literally point on a map to where they were kind of designed from, or at least inspiration. With these ship maps, I don't really feel the same. I get the themes of the maps, like Calais Port is obviously supposed to be French, Mediterranean is supposed to be in the Mediterranean, Far East is supposed to be in the East. But the issue with it is the fact that to me, it's just the same maps but reskinned for different colours and different houses, or just a slightly different castle. The functionality of the map is pretty much the same. There's nothing really different apart from one map where one of the points, or maybe 2 maps where one of the points is miles away, and if you capture it, nobody is really going to go over there to capture it, unless you run into destroyers, and then you've automatically lost that point. So yeah, it's just an odd one when it comes to it. I have been enjoying ships, but it's because I've been playing the broken stuff. I've been playing stuff like the LCS, the SF-40, and annihilating face, because that just seems to be what to do. Play the meta, and see how it feels. I understand it's a test, and I'm testing the meta, and I'm annihilating. I think I have a 10-1 KD in the LCS, 90% win rate. It's something ridiculous like that. But anyway, with the Soviet ships coming out, maybe there'll be a slight change. I'm sure we'll have a little bit more of a change until about a week's time when people figure out what's overpowered. And then we'll go back to normal. But anyway, I hope you have enjoyed this video, looking at some of the future stuff, which is interesting. Definitely when it comes to at least the radar and infrared. And I'll see you next time.